Lucas Reed never believed in second chances. Not for himself, anyway. He'd built a fortress out of sawdust and silence, convinced that a good father didn't need anything beyond his son's laughter and the weight of a hammer in his hand. But on a cold November evening, sitting alone in a lakeside cafe while strangers whispered and his phone buzzed with mocking texts from the friends who'd orchestrated this humiliation, Lucas was about to discover that some doors refuse to stay closed, no matter how hard you nail them shut. What walked through that door wasn't just a woman. It was everything he'd sworn he'd never want again. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it moves you, hit that like button. Now let me tell you how a blind date became the moment that changed everything. The cafe smelled like burnt coffee and broken promises. Lucas Reed sat with his back to the wall, an old habit from years of needing to see exits, his fingers drumming an uneven rhythm against the scarred wooden table. The lake outside the window was dark, November wind pushing whitecaps across the surface like angry thoughts. He checked his phone again. 7:43. She was 23 minutes late, and he'd been a fool for exactly 24. The moment he'd walked through the door counted as minute zero of this catastrophic error in judgment. His phone buzzed. Another text from Derek. She there yet? Or did she ghost you? LOL. Lucas didn't respond. Derek and his wife Simone had orchestrated this entire disaster with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for people who'd forgotten what loneliness actually felt like. They'd ambushed him 3 weeks ago during what he'd thought was a casual dinner, cornering him in their kitchen while his son played video games upstairs with their kids. You can't live like a monk forever, Simone had said, her hand on his arm, her voice soft with that particular brand of pity he'd learned to hate. It's been 4 years, Lucas. 4 years since the divorce. 4 years since Jennifer had looked at him across their own kitchen table, the one he'd built with his own hands, mortise and tenon joints, Danish oil finish, and told him she couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't do him anymore. She'd wanted more. More excitement, more passion, more of whatever it was she thought she'd missed by marrying her high school boyfriend who smelled like wood shavings and went to bed at 9:30 every night. She hadn't been wrong, exactly. That was the worst part. Lucas knew exactly what he was: steady, reliable, predictable. A man who showed love through fixed hinges and sanded down splinters, not grand gestures or surprise getaways. He'd built her a beautiful life, but he'd forgotten to make it exciting. So she'd left, found excitement with a pharmaceutical rep named Craig, who drove a BMW and took her to wine tastings. Lucas had kept the house, the workshop, and their son Ethan. He'd also kept the quiet, and he'd learned to prefer it that way, until Derek and Simone decided he'd been quiet long enough. Just one date, Simone had pleaded. My friend from yoga, Mara. She's amazing, Lucas. Smart, independent, totally not looking for anything serious. Just coffee. Just conversation. He should have said no. He'd meant to say no. But Ethan had been there, 11 years old and watching with those two perceptive eyes, and Lucas had seen the question forming. Is this what you're going to do forever, Dad? Just stop? So he'd said yes, and now he was here, watching condensation roll down the window, feeling like an exhibit in a museum of bad decisions. The waitress appeared again, third time, her smile increasingly sympathetic. She was young, maybe 22, with purple streaks in her hair and the kind of nose ring that would have made his mother clutch her pearls. You want another coffee, hun? No, thank you. He started to reach for his wallet. Actually, just the check. I think... The door opened. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of November rain and something else, jasmine maybe, or honeysuckle, unseasonable and out of place. Lucas looked up out of habit, expecting to see another couple, another normal person meeting another normal person for a normal date that would probably lead to a normal relationship. Instead, he saw her. She stood in the doorway for a moment, scanning the cafe with an expression that wasn't nervousness or excitement, but something closer to resignation. Tall, maybe 5'9", with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that suggested she hadn't spent 2 hours getting ready. She wore jeans, boots, and a canvas jacket that looked like it had been to places more interesting than this coffee shop. No makeup he could see. No performance. Their eyes met. Something flickered across her face. recognition maybe, though they'd never met. Or perhaps it was the same thing he felt, the weary acknowledgement of two people who'd been maneuvered into the same trap. She walked toward him, and Lucas stood without thinking, his chair scraping loud against the floor. "Lucas?" Her voice was lower than he'd expected, textured like good whiskey. "Mara?" She nodded, and something like humor touched the corners of her mouth. "I'm late. I know. I almost didn't come at all, and then I thought that would be rude. And then I sat in my car for 15 minutes arguing with myself about whether it was ruder to show up late or not show up at all." She paused. "I'm still not entirely sure I made the right call." Lucas felt his own mouth twitch. "I was about to leave when you walked in. I'd convinced myself this was some elaborate prank." "Was it?" She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "The prank, I mean." "I don't know yet." She laughed, a real laugh, not the nervous twitter he'd expected. "Fair enough." She slid into the chair across from him, unwinding a scarf from her neck. "Simone told you this was my idea, didn't she?" She implied it was mutual enthusiasm. "She told me you'd been asking about me for weeks." Mara shook her head. "I should have known. Simone has all the subtlety of a car alarm." The waitress reappeared, and Mara ordered black coffee. No sugar, no cream, just coffee. Lucas respected that. His ex-wife used to order drinks that required 3 minutes of explanation and came with whipped cream sculptures. When they were alone again, Mara leaned back in her chair, her dark eyes direct. "So, here's what I'm thinking. We've both been ambushed by well-meaning friends who apparently believe that single people are incomplete humans in need of rescue. We can sit here for 30 minutes making awkward small talk, part ways, and tell them it didn't work out. Or," she paused, "we can be honest about how absurd this is and actually have a conversation." Lucas felt something in his chest loosen, a tension he hadn't realized he was carrying. "What kind of conversation?" "The kind where we admit we weren't looking for this, where we talk like actual humans instead of people performing first date for an invisible audience." She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup the waitress had just delivered. "I haven't been on a date in 3 years. I have no idea what I'm doing here." 4 years for me," Lucas admitted, "and I'm pretty sure I never knew what I was doing even when I thought I did." "Divorce?" "Yeah, you?" She nodded. 2 years finalized, but it was over long before that. She took a sip of coffee, grimaced. "This is terrible." "It really is," Lucas agreed. "I think they make it in a bucket and just reheat it." "But you came anyway, to this place with bucket coffee and—" She glanced around. "What I can only describe as aggressively nautical decor." It was true. The cafe was committed to its lakeside theme with an intensity that bordered on parody. Fishing nets on the walls, buoys hanging from the ceiling, a mounted bass that had probably been dead since the Reagan administration. "Simone picked it," Lucas said. "I think she thought it was romantic." "It's something," Mara said diplomatically. They sat in silence for a moment, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows. A group of teenagers burst through the door, loud and young, and certain of everything, the way only teenagers could be. "So what do you do?" Mara asked, "when you're not being ambushed into blind dates?" "I'm a carpenter, custom furniture mostly, some restoration work." Lucas found himself relaxing slightly. This was safe territory. "I have a workshop behind my house. Build things for people who actually want things built to last." "As opposed to?" "IKEA." He smiled. "Don't get me wrong, there's a place for flat-pack furniture. But everything's so disposable now. Use it for a year, throw it away, buy something new. I like making things that'll outlive the people who commissioned them." Mara was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "That's romantic in its way. Is it? Building things to last?" She shrugged. "In a world where everything's temporary, yeah. I'd say that's romantic." Lucas felt heat in his face and changed the subject. "What about you?" "I'm a high school English teacher, 10th and 11th grade." She said it matter-of-factly, without the desperate enthusiasm some teachers had, the ones who needed you to know how much they loved it. "I spend my days trying to convince teenagers that Shakespeare isn't actually torture, and that sometimes the curtains being blue actually does mean something. Does it work? Occasionally. Maybe one student a year actually gets it. The rest think I'm a sadist for assigning Hamlet. She smiled. But that one student makes it worth it. What made you become a teacher? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. I wanted to do something that mattered, something small and real. She looked up. That probably sounds naive. No, Lucas said honestly. It sounds like you actually thought about it. Most people just fall into things. Did you? Fall into carpentry? Sort of. My grandfather was a Finnish carpenter, Swedish immigrant, old-school craftsman. When I was a kid, I'd spend summers in his workshop, and he'd let me sand things until my arms ached. The memory was warm, worn smooth by time. He never talked much, but when he worked, everything made sense. Every piece had a purpose. Every joint had integrity. I liked that. Integrity, Mara repeated. Not a lot of that going around these days. No. Lucas met her eyes. There isn't. Something shifted between them, subtle as a change in air pressure. The cafe noise faded slightly. The espresso machine hissing, the teenagers laughing, the bass-heavy music bleeding from someone's headphones. It was just the two of them in a bubble of understanding, two people who'd been pushed together and were discovering they didn't mind as much as they'd thought they would. I should tell you, Mara said, I have a cat named Dostoevsky. He's deeply neurotic and demands wet food at exactly 6 a.m., or he screams like he's being murdered. This is apparently a deal breaker for some men. Well, Lucas found himself genuinely smiling. I have a dog named Bear who's afraid of butterflies, and a son who's 11 and smarter than I'll ever be. What's your son's name? Ethan. Does he live with you? Full time. His mom, my ex, she has him every other weekend, but mostly it's just us. Lucas paused. He's why I said yes to this, actually. I think he worries that I'm going to turn into one of those old men who talks to his tools. Are you going to turn into that? Maybe. Lucas considered. The tools are pretty good listeners. Mara laughed again, and Lucas realized he liked the sound. It wasn't performative or delicate. It was real. The waitress approached with a hopeful expression. You folks want anything to eat? We've got pie. They looked at each other. Some wordless communication passed between them, a question asked and answered without language. Actually, Mara said, still looking at Lucas, is there anywhere else around here? Somewhere that doesn't smell like old fish and make coffee in a bucket? The waitress grinned. There's a diner about 2 miles up the road. The Bluebird. They make a decent burger. Lucas stood, pulling out his wallet. Separate checks, he said, and saw Mara nod approvingly. He left a generous tip, not the waitress's fault she was working in a nautical nightmare, and followed Mara toward the door. Outside, the November air hit them like cold water. Mara pulled her jacket tighter, her breath visible in the glow of the streetlight. I drove, she said. You? Same. Want a caravan to the diner? Or is this the part where we admit this was fine, but we have early mornings and should probably call it a night? Lucas looked at her. Really looked. She was watching him with an expression that was curious but not desperate, interested but not invested. She wouldn't be hurt if he said he needed to get home. She might even be relieved, but he didn't want to go home. Not yet. I'll follow you, he said. Her smile was small but genuine. Okay. The Bluebird Diner was everything the Lakeside Cafe wasn't. Worn linoleum, cracked red vinyl booths, the smell of grilled onions and coffee that had been made in the last hour. It was nearly empty, just a tired-looking trucker at the counter and an elderly couple in the corner booth holding hands across the table. They slid into a booth by the window. A waitress who looked like she'd been working since the Carter administration appeared with menus and coffee without asking. Specials are on the board, she said, jerking her thumb toward a chalkboard that advertised meatloaf and something called Tuesday Surprise, even though it was Friday. Holler when you're ready. Mara opened the menu, then closed it. I'm getting a burger, with fries, and probably pie after. Sounds good. When the waitress returned, they ordered identical meals, cheeseburgers, medium, fries, and a promise to look at the pie selection later. So, Mara said when they were alone, tell me something true. What? Something true. About you. Not the resume stuff. Carpenter, dad, divorced. Something real. Lucas thought about deflecting, about giving her something surface level and safe, but there was something in her directness that demanded honesty. I'm tired, he said finally. Not physically. I mean, I'm tired of pretending I'm okay with being alone. I'm tired of telling my son that I'm fine when he asks why I never go anywhere or see anyone. I'm tired of being the guy who's so together, so stable, so fucking reliable that nobody thinks I might want something more than my workshop and my dog and my carefully controlled life. The words surprised him as much as they must have surprised her. He'd never said them out loud before, hadn't even fully acknowledged them to himself. Mara didn't look away. She didn't offer platitudes or rush to fill the silence. She just nodded slowly, like he'd confirmed something she'd already suspected. I'm angry, she said. That's my true thing. I'm angry at my ex-husband for making me feel small. I'm angry at myself for letting him. I'm angry that it's been 2 years and I still flinch when someone raises their voice. I'm angry that I let one bad marriage convince me I was better off alone. And I'm angry at my friends for pushing me to try again because what if they're right? What if I'm just hiding? The waitress appeared with their food, breaking the moment. She set down plates loaded with burgers and fries, topped off their coffee, and disappeared again. They ate in silence for a few minutes, but it wasn't awkward. It felt like two people who'd said something important and needed time to sit with it. How bad was it? Lucas asked finally. Your marriage. Mara considered while she chewed a fry. Not dramatic. That's almost worse. No affairs, no huge blowout fights, just erosion. He was a lawyer, corporate law, big firm. Everything was about image. The right house, the right car, the right wife who said the right things at the right parties. She shook her head. I spent 5 years making myself smaller and quieter and more palatable. And then one day I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. What made you leave? A student, 10th grader, this girl named Aisha. Brilliant kid, writer, full of opinions. She wrote this essay about her mother staying in a marriage that was killing her spirit. And I read it in my empty house while my husband worked late again, and I realized I'd become the cautionary tale. She met his eyes. I filed the next week. How did he take it? Badly. Not because he loved me. I don't think he did. Not really. But because it looked bad. Divorce meant failure, and he doesn't do failure. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but Lucas could hear the old hurt underneath. He made it as difficult as legally possible, dragged it out, contested things that didn't need contesting. Not because he wanted anything, just because he could. Lucas felt anger rise in his chest, sharp and protective. What an asshole. Yeah, she smiled slightly. But I won, got out, kept my sanity, started over, and now I live in a one-bedroom apartment with a neurotic cat, and I say whatever the hell I want. Sounds like a good trade. It is. She ate another fry. What about yours, your ex? Lucas sighed. Jennifer. We met in high school, got married at 22, had Ethan a year later. She was my whole world, you know. I thought if I just worked hard enough, built a good enough life, made her comfortable enough, that would be sufficient. He shook his head. But she wanted passion, adventure, spontaneity, and I'm not wired that way. I'm the guy who plans vacations 6 months in advance and color codes his tools. That's not a crime, Mara said quietly. No, but it's not exciting either. He met her eyes. She left me for a guy who takes her skydiving and books last-minute trips to Cabo. And honestly, I don't blame her. She deserves to be happy, even if it wasn't with me. That's very mature of you. Or very defeated. He smiled without humor. I haven't figured out which yet. They finished their burgers while talking about smaller things, books, movies, the absurd politics of parent-teacher conferences versus PTA meetings. Lucas found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. Mara didn't need him to perform or impress her. She seemed content to just be. Two people eating mediocre diner food and talking like humans. The waitress returned with a pie carousel, 6 different kinds rotating slowly like a dessert Ferris wheel. Apple, cherry, pecan, chocolate cream, lemon meringue, and something we're calling mixed berry surprise, she announced. What's the surprise? Mara asked. That it's actually pretty good. They each got a slice of the mixed berry surprise, which was indeed surprisingly good, and shared them across the table, forks crossing in the middle of the plates. Okay, Lucas said. Rapid-fire questions. No thinking, just answers. Is this like truth or dare without the dare option? Exactly. Cats or dogs? Already told you, cats, but I respect dogs. Morning person or night person? Night. You? Extreme morning, like up at 5:30 and cheerful about it. Mara made a face. That's deeply suspicious behavior. Coffee or tea? Coffee. Always coffee. Tea is just hot leaf water. Beach or mountains? She paused. Mountains. I like being high up. Perspective. Fair, Beatles or Stones? Beatles. Is this a deal breaker? Depends. Favorite album? Revolver. You? Abbey Road. Lucas smiled. We can work with this. Generous of you. She sipped her coffee. Okay, my turn. If you could build anything, anything at all, money and physics no object, what would it be? Lucas didn't have to think. A treehouse. Not for kids, for adults. Something high up in old-growth forest with windows on all sides and a roof that opened up so you could sleep under the stars. Built into the tree, not just attached to it, like it grew there naturally. Mara's eyes had gone soft. That's beautiful. What about you? If you could teach anything, any book, any class, what would it be? Poetry, she said immediately. Just poetry. All day, every day. Teaching kids that language can be magic, that you can pack an entire universe into 14 lines. She leaned forward slightly. Do you read poetry? Not really. I mean, I know the famous ones. Robert Frost, that one about two roads. She smiled. That's okay. Most people don't. It's become this thing that's supposed to be difficult and inaccessible, when really it's just feeling, condensed. Read me something, Lucas said. What? Poetry. Read me something, right now. I don't have a book with me. You're an English teacher. You must have something memorized. She studied him for a moment, maybe trying to decide if he was serious. Then she sat back, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, and recited. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? The words hung in the air between them. Lucas felt them land somewhere in his chest, unexpected and heavy. Mary Oliver, Mara said quietly. That's the ending of a poem called The Summer Day. She's asking the question most people spend their whole lives avoiding. What's your answer? Lucas asked. To the question. I'm still figuring it out. She met his eyes. What's yours? Lucas thought about his workshop, his carefully organized tools, his quiet evenings and planned routines. He thought about Ethan growing up watching his father choose safety over risk, comfort over connection. He thought about the treehouse he'd never build, the adventures he'd never take, the life he was carefully not living. I don't know, he admitted, but I'm starting to think my current answer isn't good enough. Mara nodded slowly, understanding passing between them without words. It was past 11 when they finally left the diner. The temperature had dropped, and Lucas could see his breath in the parking lot lights. They walked toward their cars, which were parked next to each other, his beat-up F-150 and her practical Honda. So, Mara said, pulling her keys from her pocket, this was unexpected. I was going to say not terrible, but yeah, unexpected works. Lucas laughed. High praise. I mean it. She turned to face him fully. I came here tonight ready to hate this. Ready to spend 30 minutes being polite and then go home and text Simone that we tried, but there was no chemistry. Instead, she paused. Instead, I had a good time. A really good time. Me too, Lucas said, and meant it. They stood there for a moment, the space between them charged with possibility. Lucas felt like he was 17 again, awkward and uncertain, trying to read signals he'd forgotten how to interpret. Can I see you again? The words were out before he could second-guess them. Mara's smile was slow and genuine. Yeah, I'd like that. When? When are you free? I have Ethan this weekend, but maybe next week? Wednesday? Wednesday works. She pulled out her phone. Here, let me give you my number. They exchanged phones, typing in contact information with cold, clumsy fingers. When Lucas looked at his screen, he saw she'd entered herself as Mara, not a blind date disaster. He held up the phone. Confident. Accurate, she corrected. Fair enough. He saved his own number in her phone as Lucas. Surprisingly, not boring. She laughed when she saw it. Also accurate. They stood there a moment longer, neither quite ready to get in their cars and end this. Finally, Mara stepped forward and kissed his cheek, quick and warm and unexpected. Text me, she said, so I know you're real and not some elaborate hallucination brought on by bucket coffee. I will. He watched her get in her car, watched her wave as she pulled out of the parking lot. Then he sat in his truck for a long moment, the engine running, heat slowly filling the cab. His phone buzzed. Mara. Made it home. You still exist. Lucas. Still here. Same question. Mara. Unfortunately, yes. I have papers to grade and a cat judging my life choices. Lucas. My dog is also disappointed in me. I got home past his bedtime. Mara. Scandalous, you wild man. Lucas. I contain multitudes. Mara. Now who's quoting poetry? Lucas. I'm full of surprises. Mara. I'm starting to see that. Good night, Lucas. Lucas. Good night, Mara. He drove home through empty streets, the radio off, his thoughts loud in the silence. When he pulled into his driveway, he sat for a moment looking at his house, the one he'd lived in for 15 years, the one he'd stripped to the studs and rebuilt with his own hands after the divorce. It looked the same as it always did, solid and well-maintained and a little lonely. But something felt different. Inside, Bear greeted him with enthusiastic tail-wagging and mild reproach for the late hour. Lucas scratched the golden retriever's ears and checked on Ethan, who was asleep with a book still open on his chest. The Hobbit, read for the 4th time. Lucas carefully removed the book, marked the page, and turned off the bedside light. Ethan stirred but didn't wake, his hair sticking up at odd angles, his face still holding that terrible, vulnerable openness of childhood. Night, buddy, Lucas whispered. In his own room, Lucas got ready for bed, his mind replaying the evening, the terrible coffee shop, the better diner, the way Mara had looked at him when he'd admitted he was tired of being alone, the poetry she'd recited, the question it asked, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? For 4 years, his answer had been simple: survive. Raise Ethan, build furniture, don't get hurt again. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, that answer felt insufficient. His phone buzzed one more time. Mara. Still awake, can't stop thinking about that terrible nautical cafe. Who decorates like that? Lucas. Someone who lost a bet? Mara. Or someone who really loves fishing? Lucas. The mounted bass did seem like overkill. Mara. Everything about that place was overkill, except the company. Lucas smiled in the dark. Lucas. The company was pretty good. Mara. Just good? Lucas. Surprisingly excellent. Mara. Better. Now go to sleep. Some of us have to teach teenagers tomorrow. Lucas. Some of us have to build a bookshelf. Mara. Wild Friday night. Lucas. I told you. Multitudes. Mara. Good night for real this time. Lucas. Good night, Mara. He set his phone on the nightstand and lay back, staring at the ceiling. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Bear snored softly from his bed in the corner. The house settled around him, familiar and safe. But Lucas couldn't sleep. His mind kept returning to the diner, to the conversation, to the way Mara had looked when she'd recited that poetry, like the words meant something, like language could actually matter. He thought about the treehouse he'd described, the one that would never exist. He thought about Jennifer and Craig skydiving somewhere, living the life she'd wanted. He thought about Ethan, growing up too fast, watching his father choose safety over everything else. And he thought about Mara, in her apartment with her neurotic cat, grading papers and maybe thinking about him the way he was thinking about her. It wasn't love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was possibility. and that was something he hadn't felt in a very long time. His phone screen glowed one last time. Mara. I lied. One more thing. Thank you for tonight, for being honest, for not making me feel stupid for being nervous. Lucas. Thank you for showing up late and making me think I'd been pranked. Mara. Best prank ever. Lucas. Worst blind date setup ever. Best actual date in 4 years. Mara. Same. Now really go to sleep. Lucas. Yes, ma'am. Mara. Oh God, don't call me ma'am. I'm not that old. Lucas. Yes, Mara. Mara. Better. Sweet dreams. Lucas set the phone down, smiling in the darkness. Tomorrow he'd wake up at 5:30. He'd make coffee. He'd get Ethan ready for school. He'd go to his workshop and sand down the dresser he'd been commissioned to build. His life would continue exactly as it had for the past 4 years. Except now, there was Wednesday. There was Mara. There was the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the careful fortress he'd built around himself had a door after all. And maybe, just maybe, he was ready to open it. Outside, the November wind carried the promise of winter. But inside, in the darkness of his room, Lucas felt something else entirely, the first fragile warmth of hope, tentative and new and terrifying. He closed his eyes and for the first time in 4 years, let himself imagine what might come next. Wednesday arrived wrapped in gray skies and the kind of cold that suggested winter had stopped being polite about its intentions. Lucas spent the morning in his workshop, his hands moving through familiar motions while his mind wandered elsewhere. The dresser he was building, cherry wood, dovetail joints, brass hardware, demanded precision, but he kept catching himself checking his phone, watching the minutes crawl toward evening. Ethan noticed at breakfast. You're distracted, his son said, not looking up from his cereal. He had his mother's directness, that ability to see through people that made Lucas both proud and uncomfortable. Just thinking about work. Uh-huh. Ethan finally looked up, his 11-year-old eyes far too knowing. Is this about the lady from the blind date? Lucas paused, coffee mug halfway to his mouth. How do you know about that? Dad? You texted her like 40 times this weekend. You're not subtle. He crunched another bite of cereal. Also, you've been smiling at your phone. It's weird. I haven't texted her 40 times. 37, I counted. Lucas couldn't help but laugh. Okay, detective. Yes, I'm seeing her again tonight. Her name is Mara. She's a teacher. Is she nice? Yeah, she is. Ethan considered this while chewing. Good. You've been sad for a long time. It's about time you did something about it. The words hit Lucas sideways. He'd thought he'd hidden it better. The loneliness that had become so constant, he'd mistaken it for normal. But kids saw everything, absorbed everything, even when you thought you were protecting them. I wasn't that sad, he said weakly. Ethan just looked at him, and Lucas saw Jennifer in that expression, the gentle pity mixed with exasperation. Dad, you alphabetize your sandpaper, you color code your drill bits, you haven't gone anywhere except work and my school stuff in like forever. I go places. The hardware store doesn't count. Lucas set down his coffee. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't usually notice because you're busy being sad and organized. Ethan stood carrying his bowl to the sink. Just don't mess it up, okay? If she's nice, I'll try not to. Good. Ethan grabbed his backpack. Can Tyler come over Friday? We want to build a potato cannon. Absolutely not. A small potato cannon? No cannons. Try again. Fine. Can we make pizza and watch movies? That I can work with. After dropping Ethan at school, Lucas returned to the workshop, but his usual focus eluded him. He'd planned to meet Mara at 6 at a restaurant downtown, somewhere nicer than the diner, but not so formal it felt like a production. His phone buzzed around 2. Mara's text was simple. Change of plans? His stomach dropped slightly. He typed back, Everything okay? More than okay. But I had an idea. You free now instead of tonight? Lucas looked around his workshop, the half-finished dresser, the organized chaos of his tools, the safe predictability of his routine. The old Lucas would have said no, would have stuck to the plan, would have finished the workday before allowing himself to want something. He typed, Where? 20 minutes later, he was driving toward an address she'd sent him, his truck rattling slightly as he navigated streets he didn't usually travel. The neighborhood was older, Victorian houses converted into apartments, trees bare but elegant against the gray sky. He found her car parked outside a blue Craftsman with white trim, and she was sitting on the front steps waiting, wearing jeans and an oversized sweater that looked like it had been stolen from someone much larger. She stood when she saw him, her breath visible in the cold air. Hey yourself. He climbed out of the truck. What's the plan? I'm playing hooky, she said, and there was something almost defiant in her voice. Called in a personal day. Told them I had a migraine. I've never done that before. Called in when I wasn't actually sick. Rebellious. I know, right? I'm basically a criminal now. She was smiling, but Lucas could see nervousness underneath. I woke up this morning and thought, why am I waiting until tonight? Why am I following some arbitrary rule about when dates are supposed to happen? So I'm breaking the rules. Lucas felt something warm unfold in his chest. What did you have in mind? Well, she gestured toward the house. This is my place, and I thought maybe instead of sitting in a restaurant making small talk, we could do something real. I'm terrible at cooking, but I bought ingredients for pasta. We could make dinner together, or order takeout if I poison us, and just talk. Like actual humans. She paused. Unless that's too weird. Inviting you to my apartment on a second date, is that too weird? It's perfect, Lucas said honestly. Her apartment was on the second floor, a railroad-style layout that was all hardwood floors and built-in bookshelves, and the kind of character that came from being built in 1920. Dostoevsky, a massive gray cat with a permanently skeptical expression, regarded Lucas from his perch on the back of the couch. Don't mind him, Mara said, hanging up their coats. He hates everyone equally. It's very egalitarian. The apartment was lived in but not messy. Books stacked on every available surface, a coffee mug with a Jane Austen quote sitting on the side table, plants in various states of health clustered near the windows. It felt like Mara, unpretentious, thoughtful, real. I like it, Lucas said. It's small. The bedroom is barely big enough for a bed. The kitchen is basically a hallway, but it's mine, you know? After the divorce, I needed something that was just mine. He understood that completely. His own house had become that after Jennifer left, a space he'd reclaimed, rebuilt, made his own through sweat and stubbornness. The kitchen was indeed narrow, barely room for two people, but Mara had laid out ingredients on the limited counter space: pasta, tomatoes, garlic, basil, olive oil. A bottle of red wine sat open, breathing. Full disclosure, she said, tying an apron around her waist. I can grade 100 essays in an evening, but I burn scrambled eggs, so this is an adventure for both of us. Lucas rolled up his sleeves. I can cook, not fancy, but functional. My grandfather believed a man who couldn't feed himself was only half raised. Smart man. They fell into an easy rhythm. Lucas chopped garlic while Mara washed tomatoes. She poured wine into two mismatched glasses. One had a chip on the rim, the other advertised a 5K from 3 years ago. They talked while they worked, their conversation picking up where it had left off in the diner, no awkward restart required. Tell me about your son, Mara said, cutting basil with more enthusiasm than skill. Ethan. He's 11 going on 30, reads constantly, asks questions I can't answer, makes me feel like an idiot at least twice a day. Lucas smiled. He's the best thing I've ever done with my life. Does he know you're here? He interrogated me this morning, told me not to mess it up. Mara laughed. Wise kid. What does he like to read? Everything. Fantasy, science fiction, history. He tears through books like they're oxygen. Lucas added garlic to the pan, the sizzle and smell filling the small kitchen. Last week he tried to explain quantum mechanics to me using Legos. I understood maybe 30%. That's adorable. It's terrifying. He's going to be running companies or solving world hunger, and I'm over here proud when I cut a straight line. You build things that last, Mara said quietly. That matters. Does it? Yes. She set down her knife, turning to face him. We live in a world where everything's disposable, temporary, designed to break down and be replaced. Building things that endure, teaching people to value craftsmanship. That's radical. That's important. Lucas felt heat in his face, unused to this kind of direct praise. You're making furniture sound noble. It is noble. It's creating instead of consuming. It's adding something worthwhile to the world. She picked up her wine glass. I spend my days trying to teach kids that books matter, that words matter, that paying attention to how something's made is worthwhile. You're doing the same thing, just with wood instead of sentences. I never thought about it that way. Well, she touched her glass to his. Start thinking about it. They ate at her small table by the window, watching the street below as afternoon light faded toward evening. The pasta was simple but good, the wine better than Lucas usually drank. Dostoevsky eventually deigned to investigate, sniffing Lucas's shoes with deep suspicion before stalking away, his tale expressing profound disappointment. He'll warm up to you, Mara said. Give him 6 or 7 years. I'm a patient man. Are you? She leaned back in her chair, studying him. You seem patient, but I'm learning that still water runs deep with you. What does that mean? It means you're not what you appear to be at first glance. You present this very calm, controlled exterior, but underneath, she paused. There's more going on than you let people see. Lucas set down his fork. Is that a criticism? An observation. I do the same thing. Perform calm, perform put together, when really I'm anxious and second-guessing everything. She refilled their wine glasses. My ex-husband used to say I was cold, emotionless. But I wasn't cold. I was protecting myself. There's a difference. Did he hurt you? The question came out sharper than Lucas intended. I mean, physically. No, never that. Mara wrapped her hands around her glass. It was subtler. Comments about how I dressed, how I talked, who I spent time with. Always framed as helpful suggestions, you know? Maybe you should smile more at the partner's dinner. Do you really want to wear that? I think you'd be happier if you focused on the home instead of your career. She shook her head. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. By the time I left, I'd become this apologetic ghost of myself. Lucas felt anger rising again, the same protective fury he'd felt at the diner. He sounds like a piece of work. He's a lawyer. He's trained to win arguments, to find weaknesses and exploit them, and I let him because I thought that's what marriage was. Compromise, adjustment, making yourself fit someone else's vision. She met his eyes. But I was wrong. Marriage should make you more yourself, not less. Yeah, Lucas said quietly. It should. They were both silent for a moment, the weight of failed marriages sitting between them like a third presence at the table. What was she like? Mara asked finally. Your ex. Lucas considered how to answer. Jennifer was bright, like a sparkler, all flash and energy and constant motion. She wanted adventure, excitement, new experiences. And I loved that about her at first. She made me feel alive in a way I'd never felt before. He paused. But I couldn't sustain it. I'm not built for constant novelty. I like routine. I like knowing what tomorrow looks like. After a while, I think I bored her. Or maybe I disappointed her by not being someone I wasn't capable of being. That's not fair to you? Mara said. You shouldn't have to perform a personality you don't have. Maybe. But I also shouldn't have expected her to be satisfied with quiet evenings and predictable weekends. We wanted different things. We were different people. The divorce was sad, but it was also honest. We both got to stop pretending. Do you still love her? The question caught him off guard. He thought about it, really considered it. No, I don't think I do. I love who we were when we were 22 and stupid and thought love was enough. But the actual person she is now, living her life with Craig, I don't know that person well enough to love her. Mara nodded, understanding. I used to think I hated my ex, but really, I was just angry at myself for staying so long. He didn't change. I just finally saw him clearly. How long were you married? 7 years, together for 9. She stood, collecting their plates. I was 26 when we met. He was 32, established, confident. Everything I thought I should want. My parents loved him. My friends were jealous. It looked perfect from the outside. Lucas followed her to the kitchen, helping rinse dishes in the narrow space. Their shoulders brushed, and neither moved away. "When did you know it was over?" he asked. "There wasn't one moment. It was cumulative, but I remember the day I filed. It was raining, this miserable February rain, and I was sitting in my car outside his office. I drafted the papers myself, printed them at Kinko's because I didn't want anyone at school to know. And I just sat there thinking, this is it. After this, everything changes." She dried a plate slowly. "I was so scared, not of him, but of what came after, of being alone, of failing. But you did it anyway." "But I did it anyway." She smiled slightly. "Turns out being alone was better than being lonely in a marriage." They finished the dishes and moved to the living room, sitting on the couch with the kind of easy comfort that should have taken months to develop. Dostoevsky watched from his perch, yellow eyes narrowed in judgment. "Can I ask you something?" Mara said, tucking her feet under her. "Sure." "When your friends set up the blind date, why did you actually say yes? You could have refused. You're clearly not someone who gets pushed into things you don't want to do." Lucas thought about that night at Derek and Simone's, about Ethan watching him, about the question he'd seen forming in his son's eyes. "Ethan, he's starting to notice that I don't live. I work, I parent, I exist, but I don't pursue anything. I don't take risks, and I realized he was learning that from me, that after you get hurt, you just shut down, close up, play it safe." He ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't want that for him. I wanted him to see that you can be afraid and do the thing anyway." "So you went on a blind date for your son?" "Sounds ridiculous when you say it like that." "No." Mara's voice was soft. "It sounds like good parenting. It sounds like you care more about what he learns from you than about protecting yourself." "I'm not that noble. I was also lonely." "That's allowed, you know. Being lonely, wanting connection, you don't have to justify it with higher purpose." They sat in comfortable silence, the apartment settling around them. Outside, streetlights flickered on, casting warm pools of light on the wet pavement. A car passed, then another. Ordinary life continuing its ordinary rhythm. "What's the worst date you've ever been on?" Mara asked suddenly. Lucas laughed. "Are we not counting last Friday's nautical nightmare? That wasn't the worst, that was the setup to something better." "Fair point." He considered. "Okay, worst date. I was 20, home from college for the summer. My mom set me up with her friend's daughter. Nice girl, but we had absolutely nothing in common. We went to a movie, some romantic comedy she picked, and she cried through the whole thing, not because it was sad. She just cried at movies, any movies." "That's sweet, actually." "It was, until she insisted we sit in the parking lot for an hour after talking about our feelings. I was 20 and emotionally stunted. I had no feelings to discuss. It was torture." Mara was laughing now, really laughing. "Oh God, that poor girl." "I know, I felt terrible. She wanted depth and meaningful conversation, and I wanted to go home and play video games. We were fundamentally incompatible." "What about best date? Before last Friday?" Lucas went quiet, thinking back. "First date with Jennifer. We went to this terrible pizza place near campus, the kind with sticky tables and questionable health code violations. We talked for 4 hours. Closed the place down. I walked her home, and she kissed me goodnight, and I felt like I'd won the lottery. Like somehow this amazing person had chosen me." "That's lovely," Mara said softly. "It was. For a while, it really was." He looked at her. "What about you? Best and worst?" "Worst is easy. Blind date about a year after my divorce. Set up by a colleague who meant well. The guy spent the entire dinner talking about his ex-wife. Like, the entire dinner. I timed it. 47 minutes of how she'd wronged him, how she'd taken everything, how all women were basically mercenary gold diggers waiting to destroy men." She shook her head. "I excused myself to the bathroom and just left." "You ghosted him?" "I ghosted him. I'm not proud of it, but I also don't regret it. Sometimes you just know there's no point." "And best?" She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. "There was this guy in grad school, Marcus. We had exactly 3 dates before he took a job in California, and we both knew long distance wouldn't work. But those 3 dates were..." She paused, searching for words. "Perfect. like we'd known each other forever, like we could talk about anything. The third date, we stayed up all night on the roof of his apartment building, just talking and watching the city. And when the sun came up, we both knew it was ending, but it was okay because what we'd had was enough. Why didn't you try long distance? Because some things are meant to be moments, not forever. We would have ruined it by trying to force it into something it wasn't. She looked at him. I learned later he got married, had kids, built a good life. I was genuinely happy for him. What we had was real but temporary, and that's okay. Lucas understood that. The idea that not everything needed to be permanent to be meaningful. It was actually freeing, in a way. Your turn, Mara said. Tell me something you've never told anyone. That's a dangerous question. I know. She smiled. That's why I asked it. Lucas thought about deflecting, about giving her something surface level and safe. But he'd asked her to be honest, and he owed her the same. I'm scared, he said finally. Not of you, or of this specifically, but of wanting something. I spent 4 years convincing myself I was fine alone, that I didn't need anyone, that being self-sufficient was the same as being whole. And now, sitting here with you, I can feel that carefully constructed piece cracking apart. Because I want this. I want more of this. And wanting things means you can lose them. Mara didn't look away. I know. I'm scared too. Of what? Of being hurt again. Of letting someone in and having them decide I'm not worth the effort. Of becoming that small, apologetic person I was in my marriage. She set down her wine glass. But I'm also tired of being scared. Tired of letting fear make my decisions. So what do we do? I think, she considered, I think we just keep showing up. Keep being honest, keep taking the risk, even though it's terrifying. That simple? That complicated? She smiled. There's nothing simple about choosing to be vulnerable when every instinct says to protect yourself. They talked until the wine bottle was empty and the street outside had gone quiet. They talked about books and music and the small moments that had shaped them. Mara told him about her father, a mechanic who died when she was 15, and how she still sometimes caught herself starting to call him when something broke. Lucas told her about his grandfather's funeral, how he'd stolen a chisel from the old man's workshop and kept it in his truck as a reminder of what real craftsmanship looked like. I should go, Lucas said finally, though he didn't move. I have to pick up Ethan from his friend's house. Okay. Mara didn't move either. They stood simultaneously, the air between them charged with possibility. In the narrow hallway by the door, they faced each other, and Lucas could smell her shampoo, something herbal, rosemary maybe. Thank you for this, he said, for taking a risk on hooky and bad cooking. The cooking wasn't that bad. It was pretty bad. Okay, it was terrible. She was smiling, but her eyes were serious. Lucas, I need you to know, I don't do this. I don't invite men to my apartment. I don't skip work to cook pasta. I don't let people in easily. I know. So when I say I had a good time, I mean it changed something for me. Today mattered. For me too, he said quietly. They moved together without discussion, no awkward negotiation of who leaned first. The kiss was slow and deliberate, a question asked and answered. Mara tasted like red wine and tomato sauce and something uniquely her. Her hand found the back of his neck, and Lucas felt 4 years of careful control start to unravel. When they pulled apart, they stayed close, foreheads touching. Wednesday, Mara said, slightly breathless. This is going to be our day, our rebellion against normal dating rules. I can live with that. Good. She kissed him again, quick and certain. Now, go get your son before I convince you to stay. Lucas forced himself to step back, to reach for his coat, to open the door. I'll text you. You better. He made it halfway down the stairs before his phone buzzed. Mara. Already miss you. That's embarrassing. Lucas. Same. Also embarrassing. Mara. We're terrible at playing it cool. Lucas. The worst. Mara. I'm okay with that. Lucas. Me too. He drove to pick up Ethan with his mind full of the evening, the conversation, the kiss that had felt like stepping off a cliff into something unknown and terrifying and necessary. When his son climbed into the truck, he took one look at Lucas and grinned. "You're smiling weird again." "Am I?" "Yep, definitely weird." Ethan buckled his seatbelt. "So it went well?" "Yeah, it did." "Good." His son pulled out a book, clearly considering the interrogation complete. "Can we get tacos for dinner?" "Sure." They drove in comfortable silence, and Lucas thought about what Mara had said, that marriage should make you more yourself, not less. He hadn't understood that before, had thought love meant compromise and adjustment and smoothing away your rough edges. But maybe real connection was the opposite. Maybe it was finding someone who saw your edges and liked them anyway. His phone buzzed at a stoplight. "Mara, Dostoevsky just knocked over a plant. I think he's punishing me for letting a stranger into his domain." Lucas. "Tell him I come bearing peace offerings." Mara. "What kind of offerings?" Lucas. "Fancy cat treats? A sacrificial houseplant of his own?" Mara. "He's judging you so hard right now." Lucas. "I can take it. I'm winning his owner over. He'll fall in line eventually." Mara. Confident. Lucas. Determined. Mara. "I like that about you." Lucas. "I like everything about you." There was a longer pause. Then, Mara. "This is moving fast." Lucas. "Too fast?" Mara. "I don't know. Maybe, but I don't want it to slow down." Lucas. "Me neither." Mara. "So what do we do?" Lucas. "We keep showing up." Mara. "Yeah, we do." That night, after tacos and homework and the usual bedtime routine, Lucas sat in his workshop with a cup of tea and the quiet. The dresser he'd been building sat half-finished on his workbench, cherry wood glowing warm in the overhead light. He ran his hand over the surface, feeling the grain, the small imperfections that made it real. For 4 years, this had been enough. The work, the routine, the safe predictability of creation without risk. But Mara had asked him a question. What was he planning to do with his one wild and precious life? And for the first time, his answer felt urgent. He wanted more than survival, more than safety. He wanted whatever this thing was that had started in a terrible cafe and grown into something that made him want to skip work and cook bad pasta and risk the catastrophic possibility of caring about someone again. His phone buzzed one more time. Mara, I can't sleep. Keep thinking about today. Lucas. Same. Good thoughts or anxious thoughts? Mara. Both, mostly good. Some terrified. Lucas. What are you terrified of? Mara. That this is too good, that I'm going to wake up and it'll have been some elaborate dream. That you'll realize I'm actually a disaster who burns eggs and has a judgmental cat and talks too much about poetry. Lucas. I like that you talk about poetry. I like your disaster tendencies. And Dostoevsky is growing on me. Mara. He literally hissed at you. Lucas. He's protective. I respect that. Mara. You're too good. Lucas. I'm really not. I'm just a guy who builds furniture and apparently can't stop thinking about you. Mara. Lucas? Lucas. Yeah? Mara. I'm glad I showed up late to that blind date. Lucas. Best 23 minutes of waiting I've ever experienced. Mara. Go to sleep. Dream good dreams. Lucas. You too, Mara. He sat in his workshop a while longer, tea cooling in his hands, the house quiet around him. Through the window, he could see stars between the bare branches, distant and constant. His grandfather used to say that good work required patience, that you couldn't rush the process, couldn't force the wood to be something it wasn't. You had to work with the grain, respect the material, let things develop at their own pace. Maybe relationships were the same. Maybe you couldn't force connection or rush intimacy. Maybe you just had to show up, be honest, and trust that if the grain ran true, everything else would follow. Lucas finished his tea, turned off the workshop lights, and headed inside. Tomorrow he'd wake at 5:30, make coffee, get Ethan ready for school. His life would continue in its careful rhythm. But now there was Mara woven through it, texts and conversations, and the promise of more Wednesdays, more rebellion against the careful fortress he'd built around his heart. He climbed into bed and, for the second night in a row, fell asleep thinking about possibility, about what it meant to want something badly enough to risk losing it, about the kind of courage it took to keep showing up when every past hurt whispered warnings. But underneath the fear was something stronger, hope, fragile and new and absolutely terrifying. And Lucas decided, lying there in the dark, that maybe that was enough. Maybe hope was always enough to start with, and the rest would follow if he was brave enough to let it. Outside his window, the November night stretched on, cold and clear and full of stars that had been burning for millennia. And inside, in the quiet of his home, Lucas Reed let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he was allowed to want the warmth again.
The weeks that followed developed their own rhythm, a pattern woven from stolen hours and deliberate choices. Lucas and Mara fell into Wednesday like it was sacred ground. Their rebellion against conventional dating transformed into something more substantial. They met for coffee before work, for walks along the lake when the light turned gold, for dinners that stretched past midnight. Each encounter peeled back another layer, revealed another truth they'd been carrying alone. Ethan met Mara 3 weeks in, a carefully orchestrated non-event that Lucas had stressed over until his son had finally looked at him with exasperation and said, "Dad, I'm 11, not 5. I can handle meeting your girlfriend without making it weird." But Lucas had made it weird anyway, tidying the house until it looked like a furniture showroom, changing his shirt twice, checking the refrigerator to make sure they had the kind of snacks that impressed teachers. When Mara arrived with a worn copy of The Hobbit and told Ethan she'd heard he was a Tolkien fan, his son's wariness had melted into enthusiasm within 5 minutes. They'd spent the evening on the living room floor building Lego sets while Mara asked questions that actually required thought. Not the patronizing adult questions Lucas had feared, but real engagement with what Ethan cared about. When she left, his son had given him a thumbs up and said, "She's cool, don't mess it up." Lucas had no intention of messing it up, but the fear lived in him anyway. A constant low hum of anxiety that this was too good, too easy, too right to possibly last. Mara seemed to carry the same fear, though she wore it differently, in the way she sometimes pulled back when conversations got too deep, in the careful distance she maintained even as they grew closer. It was the first Saturday in December when everything shifted. They'd planned a simple day, the farmer's market downtown, lunch at the diner that had become their place, maybe a movie after if they felt like it. Ethan was with Jennifer for the weekend, and Lucas had the rare luxury of unstructured time stretching before him like a gift. The market was crowded, the air sharp with cold and rich with the smell of roasted chestnuts and fresh bread. They wandered through stalls selling everything from hand-thrown pottery to organic honey, their gloved hands occasionally brushing, both of them stealing warmth from proximity without acknowledging it directly. Mara stopped at a booth selling old books, her fingers trailing over cracked spines and faded covers. She pulled out a slim volume, poetry of course, and opened it to a random page, reading silently. "Good?" Lucas asked. "Listen to this." She cleared her throat and read. "The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seem filled with the intent to be lost that their loss is no disaster." She looked up. Elizabeth Bishop, One Art. It's about loss and how we lie to ourselves about it not mattering. Dark for a Saturday morning. Maybe. She closed the book carefully. But honest. I like honest. Lucas bought her the book over her protests, handing the vendor a 10 and pocketing the change while Mara shook her head. "You don't have to buy me things," she said as they walked away. "I know. I wanted to." "Why?" "Because you lit up when you read it. Because I like seeing you happy." He paused. "Because I'm terrible at poetry, and this is my way of saying I'm paying attention to what matters to you." She stopped walking, people flowing around them like water around stones. "Lucas Reed, you're going to ruin me for all other men." "Good," he said, and meant it. They continued through the market, collecting small treasures, fresh bread, local honey, coffee beans roasted that morning. Mara bought a small succulent for her apartment, then insisted on buying one for Lucas too, claiming his house needed something living that wasn't his dog. "I have plants," he protested. "Where?" "In the yard." "Indoor plants. Things that require actual care and attention." "I give things care and attention." "To wood. I'm talking about living organisms that will judge you if you forget to water them." Lucas accepted the succulent, a fat little thing in a ceramic pot shaped like a hedgehog.
Does it have a name? Not yet. You have to earn the right to name it by keeping it alive for a month. Challenge accepted. They were laughing, debating the ethics of naming plants, when Lucas saw Mara's expression change. It happened fast, her smile freezing, then cracking, her body going rigid beside him. He followed her gaze across the market and saw a man approaching, late 40s, expensive coat, the kind of polished confidence that came from never having been told no. Mara. The man's voice was smooth, practiced. What a surprise. Richard. Her voice had gone flat, carefully neutral. Lucas felt her hand tighten on his arm. This was the ex-husband, then. Lucas felt his own body respond, protective instincts rising sharp and immediate. Richard's eyes flicked to Lucas, assessing and dismissing in the same glance. I didn't know you shopped at the farmer's market. You always said it was overpriced nonsense for people with more money than sense. People change, Mara said quietly. Apparently. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Are you going to introduce me to your friend? Lucas felt Mara's hesitation, saw her internal calculation. Was it safer to engage or retreat? He made the decision for her, extending his free hand. Lucas Reed. Richard's handshake was exactly what Lucas expected, firm to the point of aggressive, a dominance display disguised as greeting. Richard Collins. Mara's husband. Ex-husband, Mara corrected, her voice sharp. Of course. Ex-husband. Richard's smile widened slightly, pleased at drawing blood. Force of habit. 7 years is hard to shake. Lucas felt Mara trembling slightly beside him, barely perceptible but unmistakable. He wanted to end this conversation, to extract her from this interaction that was clearly causing pain, but he also understood that leaving too quickly would feel like retreat. We were just heading out, Lucas said evenly. Good seeing you. Actually, Mara, I'm glad I ran into you. I've been meaning to call. Richard shifted his attention back to her, ignoring Lucas's dismissal. About the settlement. My lawyer thinks there might have been some oversights in the paperwork. We should discuss it. The divorce was finalized 2 years ago, Richard. There's nothing to discuss. I think there is. The house in particular, I'm not sure the valuation was accurate. I may have been too generous. Lucas felt Mara's entire body go tense. He understood what was happening. This wasn't about money or property. This was about power, about Richard's need to maintain control even after the marriage had ended. You can have your lawyer contact mine if you have concerns, Mara said, her voice carefully controlled. I'm not discussing this here. You're right. This isn't the place. Richard pulled out his phone, making a show of checking it. I'm having dinner at Morrison's next Friday. Why don't you join me? We can handle this like adults. No. The word was simple, final. Lucas felt a surge of pride at how steady Mara's voice remained. Richard's expression shifted, charm dropping away to reveal something colder underneath. Don't be difficult, Mara. This is a simple conversation between two reasonable people, unless you'd prefer to make it complicated. I said no. Mara's voice was stronger now. The divorce is done. If you have legal concerns, go through the proper channels. But you and I have nothing to discuss. For a moment, Richard's mask slipped entirely, and Lucas saw something ugly flash across his face. Rage at being defied, frustration at losing control. Then the smooth smile returned, but it was sharper now, weaponized. You always were stubborn. I see that hasn't changed. He turned to Lucas. Good luck with that. She's more trouble than she's worth, but I suppose you'll figure that out eventually. Lucas felt his temper rise, hot and immediate, but Mara's grip on his arm tightened, a warning, a plea. He swallowed his response, forcing himself to stay calm. We're leaving, Mara said, already turning away. They walked quickly through the market, Mara's breathing rapid and shallow. Lucas guided her toward the parking lot, searching for privacy, somewhere she could fall apart if she needed to. They made it to his truck before her composure cracked. I'm sorry, she said, her voice shaking. I'm so sorry you had to see that. You have nothing to apologize for. She stopped, her hands trembling as she tried to unlock emotions she'd clearly been holding back. He's not supposed to contact me. Our lawyers agreed, all communication goes through them. But he does this sometimes, just shows up, pushes boundaries, reminds me that he can. Lucas felt fury building, carefully controlled but absolute. How often does this happen? Every few months, he calls or sends emails or just appears like this, always with some excuse, legal questions, mutual friends, whatever. But it's really about control, about reminding me that I'm not really free. Mara, that's harassment. I know, but what am I supposed to do? File a restraining order over uncomfortable conversations? He's careful. He never actually threatens me. He just makes me feel small and stupid and scared, and he's so good at it that I can't even explain why it's wrong. Tears were sliding down her face now, anger and humiliation mixed together. I hate that he still has this power over me. I hate that I'm standing here crying because my ex-husband said hello. Lucas pulled her into his arms, feeling her shake against him. People walked past, curious glances sliding over them, but he didn't care. He doesn't have power over you, Lucas said quietly. You stood up to him. You said no. You walked away. That's not weakness, Mara. That's strength. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like I'm still running. Sometimes running is the right choice, especially when the other option is engaging with someone who's trying to hurt you. They stood there in the parking lot, the December cold seeping through their coats, while Mara's breathing slowly steadied. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. I don't want to go home, she said. I can't be alone right now. Okay. Where do you want to go? She looked at him, something vulnerable and desperate in her expression. Your place? Is that okay? I just need to be somewhere that feels safe. Of course. They drove separately, Lucas watching her car in his rearview mirror the entire way, making sure she was following, making sure she was okay. When they pulled into his driveway, she sat in her car for a long moment before getting out, composing herself, rebuilding whatever armor she needed to face the world. Inside, Bear greeted them with his usual enthusiasm, and Mara dropped to her knees to accept his affection, burying her face in his fur. Lucas made coffee while she recovered, giving her space but staying close enough that she knew she wasn't alone. She found him in the kitchen, her eyes dry but tired. Can I see your workshop? It was an unexpected request, but Lucas understood it. She needed distraction, needed to focus on something concrete and real after the abstract horror of running into Richard. The workshop was Lucas's sanctuary, the place where everything made sense. He'd built it himself, converting the detached garage into a space that was half workspace, half chapel, to the religion of craftsmanship. The walls were lined with tools organized with obsessive precision. Works in progress sat on various benches, a dining table being refinished, a bookshelf in its early stages, the dresser he'd been building for weeks. Mara walked slowly through the space, her fingers trailing over surfaces, touching things with reverence. She stopped at the dresser, examining the dovetail joints with real interest. This is beautiful, she said quietly. It's not finished yet. But you can see what it's going to be. That's the beautiful part. She turned to face him. Do you have a piece that's yours? Something you made just because you wanted to, not for a commission? Lucas gestured to the corner, where a rocking chair sat covered with a drop cloth. That. I've been working on it for about a year, whenever I have spare time. Mara pulled off this cloth, revealing the chair underneath. It was made from walnut, the grain rich and dark, every joint perfect, every curve deliberate. Lucas had carved a simple pattern into the headrest, branches and leaves, something organic and alive. Lucas, this is... She sat down carefully, the chair moving smoothly on its curved runners. This is art. It's just a chair. No, it's not. She ran her hand along the armrest. This is you in physical form, every careful detail, every perfect joint, every thoughtful curve. This is what you do when no one's watching, when you're not trying to impress anyone or meet anyone's expectations. This is honest. Lucas felt heat in his face, uncomfortable with the praise but also deeply moved by her understanding. My grandfather had a rocking chair. He'd sit in it every evening, smoke his pipe, read the newspaper. When he died, my grandmother gave it to my uncle, and I always regretted not asking for it. So I'm making my own. For who? I don't know yet. Maybe for me when I'm old. Maybe for Ethan someday. Maybe for whoever needs it. Mara stood, moving toward him with deliberate steps. When she reached him, she put her hands on his chest, looking up at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Thank you, she said. For what? For bringing me here. For showing me this. For not asking questions or demanding explanations. For just being steady when everything else feels chaotic. Mara, I'm falling for you. The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding them back and couldn't anymore. I know it's fast. I know we said we'd take things slow. But I'm falling for you, and it terrifies me because the last time I let someone in, it nearly destroyed me. But I can't help it. You're kind and patient, and you build beautiful things, and you make me feel safe, and I don't know what to do with all of that. Lucas felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Everything in him wanted to say it back, to tell her he'd been falling since the nautical cafe, since the terrible coffee and her direct honesty. But he also saw the fear in her eyes, the way she was braced for rejection. I'm falling for you too, he said quietly. And you're right, it is terrifying. Because I spent 4 years convincing myself I was better off alone, and now I'm not sure how I'd go back to that if this doesn't work. What if it does work? That's almost scarier. She laughed, a little desperate, a little relieved. We're a mess. Yeah, we are. Lucas, can I stay here tonight? I don't want to assume anything. I just don't want to go back to my empty apartment and sit alone thinking about Richard, and how he still makes me feel like I'm that scared person who couldn't stand up for herself. Of course you can stay. He hesitated. Guest room or with you, if that's okay. I just want to feel like I'm not alone. They ordered Thai food that neither of them ate much of, picked at spring rolls while sitting on his couch, Bear's head resting on Mara's lap. They talked about nothing important, a documentary she'd watched, a project Ethan had been working on, the absurd price of good coffee beans, safe conversation, the kind that filled space without demanding anything. When exhaustion finally claimed her, Lucas showed her to his bedroom, the one he'd repainted after the divorce, the one that held no memories of Jennifer, just his own solitary nights and quiet mornings. He gave her a t-shirt to sleep in, showed her where the towels were, told her to help herself to anything she needed. She emerged from the bathroom looking smaller somehow, vulnerable in his oversized shirt, her face scrubbed clean of the day. They stood on opposite sides of the bed, the weight of the moment stretching between them. I haven't done this in a long time, Mara said quietly. Just slept next to someone, without expectations or performance. Just closeness. Me neither. They climbed into bed with careful politeness, maintaining space between them until Mara broke and moved closer, her head finding his shoulder, her arm draping across his chest. Lucas wrapped his arms around her, feeling her gradually relax against him. Tell me something true, she murmured, her voice already heavy with sleep. I was angry today. When I saw how Richard made you feel, I wanted to hurt him. I'm not a violent person, but I wanted to make him feel small the way he makes you feel small. That's sweet in a very concerning way. I know, sorry. Don't be sorry. It's nice to have someone get angry on my behalf. My ex used to tell me I was overreacting, that I was too sensitive. Even when I was hurt or upset, he'd find a way to make it about my flaws instead of his behavior. Lucas tightened his arms around her. You're not overreacting. You're not too sensitive. You're allowed to be angry at someone who hurt you. Therapy has been saying that for 2 years. It's harder to believe when the person who convinced you otherwise lived in your head for so long. What else did therapy say? That I'm allowed to want things, that my needs matter, that I don't have to earn affection by being perfect. She shifted slightly, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. That trauma doesn't have to define me, even though it changed me. Are you? Changed? Completely. I used to be softer, more trusting. I'd give people the benefit of the doubt, assume good intentions. Now I'm suspicious and guarded, and I push people away before they can hurt me. She paused. Except you. For some reason, I can't push you away. Do you want to? Sometimes. When it gets scary, when I feel myself caring too much, there's this voice in my head that says I should run before you can leave first. But then I remember how you looked at me in the farmer's market, like you'd fight dragons for me if I asked. And I think maybe it's worth the risk. I would, Lucas said quietly. Fight dragons, if they existed and you asked. She laughed against his chest, the sound warm and real. Good to know. I'll keep that in reserve for emergencies. They lay in comfortable silence, the house settling around them, the world narrowing to just this moment. Two people who'd been hurt learning to trust again, building something fragile and real in the ruins of what came before. Lucas? Mara's voice was drowsy now, slipping toward sleep. Yeah? Thank you for being steady, for being exactly who you are and not trying to be anything else. You have no idea how much that matters. You too, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Sleep now. She did, her breathing evening out, her body going heavy against him. Lucas lay awake longer, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the day. About Richard and the casual cruelty of his words, about Mara's tears in the parking lot, about how she'd asked to come here because she needed to feel safe. He thought about what it meant to build a relationship after trauma, how you had to be gentle with the broken places while also trusting that healing was possible, how you had to show up consistently, reliably, proving through action that you were different from what came before. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, probably Derek checking in, or Ethan texting from his mom's house. But Lucas didn't reach for it, didn't want to disturb the peace of this moment. The world could wait. Right now, all that mattered was the woman sleeping in his arms and the quiet promise they were making to each other, that maybe, despite all the reasons to be afraid, they were brave enough to try. Rain started sometime after midnight, tapping against the windows with increasing insistence. Lucas listened to it, feeling Mara's steady breathing, Bear's soft snoring from his bed in the corner, the familiar creaks of his house around him. This was home, but it felt different now, less like a fortress and more like a foundation, something to build on rather than hide behind. He thought about the rocking chair in his workshop, the one he'd been making without a clear purpose. Maybe that was okay. Maybe not everything needed to be planned and purposeful. Maybe some things were worth making just because they mattered, because they represented care and attention and the hope that someday they'd find the right place. Mara stirred slightly, murmuring something he couldn't make out, then settled deeper into sleep. Lucas closed his eyes, letting himself drift, feeling the weight of her trust like a sacred responsibility. Tomorrow would bring its own complications. They'd have to talk about Richard, about boundaries, about what came next. But tonight, this was enough. Outside, the December rain turned the world soft and dark. Inside, in the warmth of his bedroom, Lucas Reed held the woman who'd walked into his carefully ordered life and shown him that sometimes the best things were unplanned, unexpected, and absolutely worth the risk. He fell asleep thinking about steady hands and fragile hope, about building something real from the wreckage of what came before. And in his arms, Mara dreamed of safety and belonging, of a man who saw her clearly and chose her anyway, of a future that didn't require her to be smaller or quieter or anything other than exactly who she was. They slept like that, two people learning to trust again, while the rain washed the world clean outside and morning waited with its gentle promise of new beginnings. Morning came soft and gray, the rain from the night before leaving everything washed clean and quiet. Lucas woke first, as he always did, his internal clock set to those early hours when the world still belonged to people who worked with their hands. But this time, instead of climbing out of bed to start coffee and organize his day, he stayed still, watching Mara sleep. She'd shifted during the night, her face pressed against his shoulder, one hand curled loosely against his chest. In sleep, the careful guardedness she carried while awake had dissolved, leaving her looking younger, softer, more vulnerable than she'd ever allow in daylight. Lucas felt the weight of that vulnerability, the trust it represented, and something in his chest tightened with the responsibility of it. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused for a moment before finding his face. A small smile touched her lips. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi. What time is it?" "Early. Just past 6. She groaned softly. "You really are a morning person. That's deeply unnatural. I can be quiet, go back to sleep." "No." She stretched, arching her back like a cat before settling closer to him. "I'm awake now. Besides, I like this. Just lying here. No agenda, no expectations." They stayed like that for a while, the room growing gradually lighter as dawn broke through the clouds. Lucas could hear Bear stirring in the corner, the soft thump of his tail against the floor, as he realized there were people awake. I should take him out, Lucas said reluctantly. Okay. Mara didn't move. But then come back. We'll make breakfast or something. Lucas slipped out of bed, pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt, and took Bear into the backyard. The grass was wet, the air sharp with cold, and the green smell of rain-washed earth. He stood on the back porch while Bear investigated the perimeter, his breath visible in the morning air, his mind already jumping ahead to the conversation he knew was coming. They'd have to talk about Richard, about what yesterday meant, about boundaries and next steps. But more than that, they'd have to talk about what was happening between them. This thing that had started as a joke blind date and become something that felt essential, necessary, like breathing. When he returned inside, Mara was in the kitchen wearing his bathrobe, examining his coffee setup with the intensity of someone solving a complex equation. You have 3 different brewing methods, she observed. French press, pour over, and is that an espresso machine? My one indulgence. Good coffee. Not furniture making, not power tools? Those are necessities, not indulgences. He moved beside her, starting the espresso machine's warm-up cycle. How do you take it? Strong and black, like my soul. Dramatic before coffee, noted. She smiled, hopping onto the counter while he worked. I've been thinking. About? Yesterday, Richard, all of it. She pulled the robe tighter around herself. I need to do something about him. Legally, I mean. The harassment has to stop. Agreed. It's just hard, because on paper it looks like nothing. Random encounters, occasional emails, phone calls that are technically about legitimate things. But the pattern of it, the intent behind it, that's harder to document. Lucas pulled 2 shots of espresso, the machine hissing and gurgling. What does your lawyer say? That we can send a cease and desist, establish a paper trail. If he violates it, we have grounds for a restraining order. She accepted the tiny cup he handed her, inhaling the steam. But it feels like escalation, Like I'm making it bigger than it needs to be. He's been doing this for 2 years, Mara. That's not small. I know. Rationally, I know. But there's still this voice in my head, his voice, actually, telling me I'm overreacting, being dramatic, making problems where none exist. Lucas leaned against the counter beside her. What would you tell a student in your position? If a girl came to you and described what you just described, an ex who keeps showing up, who makes her feel unsafe, who won't respect boundaries, what would you tell her? Mara was quiet for a moment, staring into her espresso. I'd tell her that her feelings are valid. That manipulation often looks reasonable from the outside, and that's what makes it effective. That she deserves to feel safe and that taking steps to ensure her safety isn't dramatic. It's necessary. So there's your answer. It's easier to give good advice than to take it. Usually is. He touched her knee gently. But you don't have to do this alone. I'll come with you to your lawyer if you want, or I'll wait in the car, or I'll just be available to text you encouragement. Whatever you need. She set down her cup and pulled him closer, wrapping her arms around his waist. How are you real? Seriously. Men like you don't exist in my experience. They're myths, urban legends, things people make up to sell romance novels. I'm aggressively average. You're really not. She pulled back to look at him. You're kind without performing kindness. You're present without demanding attention. You offer support without trying to fix everything. Do you know how rare that is? Lucas felt heat creeping up his neck. I'm just doing what seems right. Exactly. It seems right to you because you're fundamentally decent. But I've dated men, married a man, for whom decency was a strategy, not a default. Being kind was something they did when it benefited them, not because it mattered. Richard sounds like he was a real piece of work. He was successful, charming, ambitious. Everyone thought I was lucky. She laughed without humor. And I believed them. I thought I should be grateful that someone like him chose someone like me. So I made myself smaller and quieter and more convenient, and I told myself that's what compromise looked like. Lucas pulled her closer, feeling her tension. I'm sorry you went through that. I'm sorry I let it happen for so long. But I'm also grateful, in a weird way, because it taught me what I won't accept, what I won't compromise on. She looked up at him. And it makes this, us, feel even more important. Because I know the difference now. between someone who wants to possess you and someone who wants to know you. Which am I? You know which. They made breakfast together in his small kitchen, scrambled eggs, toast, bacon that Lucas cooked to perfect crispness, while Mara set the table and stole bites of everything. It was domestic and simple and achingly normal, the kind of morning that couples who'd been together for years took for granted. But Lucas didn't take it for granted. Every moment felt precious, weighted with the knowledge that this could end, that vulnerability invited the possibility of pain. Over breakfast, Mara's phone buzzed repeatedly. She ignored it the first few times, but eventually checked it with a resigned sigh. It's Simone. She wants to know if I'm alive and whether I need her to come kill Richard. She typed quickly. I'm telling her I'm fine and at your place. How's she going to respond to that? Probably with excessive celebration and demands for details I'm not going to give her. Her phone buzzed again almost immediately. Yep, she says, and I quote, OMG, finally. Also, are you okay? Also, tell me everything. Also, I'm so sorry about Richard being Richard. Lucas smiled. She sounds like a good friend. She is. Exhausting, but good. Mara typed back, then set her phone aside. She wants to have dinner this week. Double date. You, me, her, Derek. Are you up for that? Are you? I think so. They're going to be insufferable about being right, about us, about the blind date working out. But yeah, I want them to see us together, to see that I'm happy. Are you? Happy? She reached across the table, taking his hand. Terrified and happy. They coexist surprisingly well. They spent the rest of the morning in comfortable domesticity. Mara graded papers at Lucas's kitchen table while he worked in his shop on the dresser. The doors opened between them so they could talk intermittently. It felt like a preview of something more permanent, a glimpse of how their lives might weave together if they let them. Around noon, Mara's expression shifted while reading through an essay. Lucas looked up from the drawer he was sanding. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. This is just... She held up the paper. One of my students wrote about divorce. Her parents split up last year, and she's processing it through poetry analysis. She's comparing her family to a broken sonnet. The structure's still there, but the rhyme scheme disrupted. That's pretty brilliant for a high schooler. It is, but it's also heartbreaking. She set down the paper. I forget sometimes that my students carry these huge things. Divorce, abuse, poverty, loss. And they show up every day and do the work anyway. Sounds like someone else I know. She smiled slightly. I guess we all do that, don't we? Show up despite the weight we're carrying. What else can you do? Give up. Hide. Stop trying. She stood, stretching. But I'm tired of hiding. I did that for too long with Richard, pretended everything was fine, performed happiness while dying inside. I don't want to do that anymore. What do you want? She walked into the workshop, her bare feet silent on the concrete floor. I want this, whatever this is. I want morning coffee and shared silence and someone who doesn't need me to perform or pretend. I want to feel safe being exactly who I am, messy and scared and still figuring it out. Lucas set down his sandpaper, giving her his full attention. You have that. With me. Always. Even when I'm a disaster, when I cry over running into my ex, when I need reassurance every 5 minutes that you're not going to leave. Especially then. She moved closer, wrapping her arms around his waist, heedless of the sawdust on his clothes. I'm going to mess this up, you know, say the wrong thing, get scared and pull away, test whether you mean what you say. Probably, I'll mess it up too. I'll be too careful, overthink everything, retreat into my workshop when conversations get hard. So we're both disasters. Compatible disasters. She laughed against his chest. Is that what we're calling it? Until we think of something better. They stood like that for a while, holding each other in the quiet workshop, surrounded by half-finished projects and the smell of wood and oil. Lucas felt something settle in his chest. Not certainty exactly, but acceptance. This thing between them was real and complicated and worth fighting for. Mara's phone rang, breaking the moment. She groaned but pulled it out, her expression shifting when she saw the caller ID. It's my lawyer, she said, then answered. Hello? Yes. Hi, Sharon. What? When? Her face went pale. Are you serious? Okay. No, I understand. Yes, I'll call you back. She lowered the phone slowly, her hand shaking. What happened? Lucas asked. Richard filed something. Sharon's not sure what yet. She just got a notice that there's a motion filed regarding our divorce settlement. She's trying to get details. Lucas felt cold fury rise in his chest. He's doing this because of yesterday, because you stood up to him. Maybe. Probably. Mara sank onto a workbench, her legs seeming unable to support her. He said something about the settlement at the market. I thought he was just being an asshole, but he was serious. He's actually trying to... She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. I can't do this again. I can't go through months of legal battles and depositions and him trying to take everything I fought for. Lucas knelt in front of her, taking her hands. Listen to me. You're not alone this time. Last time you faced him by yourself, right? But now you have people. You have me, Simone, Derek. You have a lawyer who knows what she's doing. And most importantly, you have yourself, the version of you who survived the divorce and built a new life. You're stronger than you think. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm 19 again, believing him when he told me I was lucky he put up with me. But you're not 19. You're a woman who walked away from a toxic marriage, who rebuilt her life from scratch, who stands in front of teenagers every day and teaches them to think critically and value themselves. That's not weakness, Mara. That's courage. She looked at him with tears streaming down her face. What if he wins? What if he takes the settlement, drags this out for years, makes my life hell just because he can? Then we deal with it, together. But he's not going to win because bullies like Richard rely on their victims being isolated and afraid. You're neither of those things anymore. I'm definitely afraid. Being afraid and being alone are different things. You're allowed to be scared, but you don't have to face this by yourself. She pulled him close, burying her face in his shoulder. Lucas held her while she cried, not the quiet, controlled tears from yesterday, but deep, wrenching sobs that sounded like they'd been held back for years. He let her cry, offering no platitudes or false promises, just steady presence. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were swollen but clear. I need to call Sharon back, get the details. Okay. Will you stay while I talk to her? I'm not going anywhere. Mara called her lawyer back, putting the phone on speaker so Lucas could hear. Sharon's voice was calm and professional, the voice of someone who'd handled situations like this before. Based on the filing, it looks like Richard is challenging the property settlement. Specifically, he's claiming the house valuation was inaccurate and that he's entitled to additional compensation. That's insane, Mara said. We used a certified appraiser, 3 of them actually, because Richard insisted on multiple opinions. I know, and that's going to work in our favor, but he's also claiming you pressured him into accepting the settlement, that he was emotionally compromised and not thinking clearly. Mara laughed, a bitter sound. He's claiming I pressured him? He dragged out the divorce for 18 months, contested every single item, and made me prove the value of everything I wanted to keep, including my grandmother's china. But sure, I pressured him. I know it's frustrating, but here's the good news. This is a weak case. Judges don't like reopening settlements without significant cause, and I changed my mind isn't significant cause. We'll file a response, document the entire divorce process, and demonstrate that this is harassment, not legitimate legal action. How long will this take? Hard to say. Could be a few weeks, could be a few months. But Mara, I need you to document everything. If Richard contacts you, calls, texts, emails, accidental meetings, you document it. Time, date, what was said. We're building a pattern of harassment case alongside the settlement defense. Okay, I can do that. And Mara, don't engage with him directly. No matter what he says or does, you don't respond. Everything goes through me. Understood? Understood. After the call ended, Mara sat in silence, her jaw set with determination that Lucas recognized. It was the same expression she'd had when she told Richard no at the farmer's market. I'm going to fight him, she said quietly. Not because I want to, but because I have to. Because if I don't, he wins. He gets to control my life even after the divorce. And I refuse to give him that power. Good, Lucas said simply. It's going to be messy, stressful. There will be days when I'm impossible to be around, when I'm angry and scared and taking it out on whoever's closest. That might be you. I can handle it. Can you? Because I need to know, are you in this? Really in this? Because if you're going to decide it's too complicated, too much drama, I'd rather know now, before I let myself need you. Lucas took her face in his hands, making her look at him. I'm in this. I'm in you. Whatever comes, we face it together. Richard can file 100 motions, and we'll fight every single one. This doesn't scare me away, Mara. If anything, it makes me more certain. Certain of what? That you're worth fighting for. That what we have is worth protecting. That I'm not running just because things get complicated. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, pouring everything she couldn't say into the connection between them. Lucas kissed her back with equal intensity, feeling the shift between them, from tentative to committed, from possibility to promise. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Mara rested her forehead against his. I'm falling in love with you, she whispered. I know it's fast and probably stupid and definitely terrifying, but I can't help it. You make me feel safe and seen and like I'm allowed to take up space in the world. And I love you for that. Lucas felt his heart stutter, then race. The words he'd been holding back, scared to say them too soon, afraid of the vulnerability they represented, rose up and demanded release. I love you too, he said. I think I started falling that first night, when you walked in late and we both realized we'd been set up. And every day since, I've fallen a little more. So yeah, it's fast and probably stupid and definitely terrifying. But it's also real. And I'm done pretending it's not. They stood in the workshop surrounded by sawdust and unfinished projects. Two people who'd been broken by their pasts choosing to build something new together. Outside, the December afternoon was fading toward evening, the light going golden and soft. Inside, everything felt sharp and clear and possible. What do we do now? Mara asked. Now we live, we fight Richard's nonsense. We keep showing up for each other. We build this thing between us until it's strong enough to weather whatever comes. He paused. And we probably should eat something. It's almost dinner time. She laughed, the sound lighter than it had been all day. Practical and romantic. That's quite a combination. I contain multitudes. You really do. They ordered pizza and ate it on Lucas's couch with Bear sprawled between them, grading papers and discussing the wood grain on the dresser with equal seriousness. It was ordinary and perfect, the kind of evening that became the foundation of a life, if you let it. When Mara's phone rang again later that evening, they both tensed, but it was just Simone checking in. I'm fine, Mara assured her. Actually, I'm better than fine. I'm figuring things out. Lucas could hear Simone's excited response even from across the couch, something about being right and knowing it would work out. Yes, you were right, Mara said, rolling her eyes fondly. You're always right. It's very annoying. Now can we schedule that dinner so you can gloat in person? They settled on Wednesday, their day, their rebellion, at a restaurant that promised neither nautical themes nor bucket coffee. After hanging up, Mara curled into Lucas's side with a contented sigh. I should probably go home soon, she said without moving. Feed Dostoevsky, get ready for the week. You could stay again, if you want. I do want, but I also need to prove to myself that I can go home, can be alone without falling apart. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. But maybe tomorrow we could have dinner, your place or mine, I don't care. I just want to see you. Tomorrow works, I'll cook. You don't have to. I want to. He kissed the top of her head. Besides, someone needs to make sure you eat actual food instead of coffee and anxiety. I resent that accurate assessment of my diet. When she finally left, Lucas stood in the doorway watching her car pull away, the same ritual from their first real date. But this time, everything was different. This time they'd said the words. This time the fear was still there, but so was certainty. Not about the future, which remained unknowable, but about the present, about what they were building together. His phone buzzed before he'd even closed the door. Mara. Made it home. Dostoevsky is judging me for abandoning him. Lucas. Tell him I'm sorry. Mara. He doesn't care about your apologies, only treats. Lucas. Noted. I'll bring offerings tomorrow. Mara. You don't have to bribe my cat. Lucas. I absolutely do. I need him on my side. Mara. Why? Lucas. Because I'm planning to be around a long time. Might as well start building alliances. There was a longer pause before she responded. Mara. A long time, huh? Lucas. If you'll have me. Mara. Yeah, I think I will. Lucas. Good. Now go feed your judgmental cat and get some sleep. Mara. Bossy. Lucas. Concerned. Mara. I love you. Lucas. I love you too. He stood in his quiet house, phone still in hand, feeling the words settle into reality. He loved her. She loved him. It was terrifying and perfect and absolutely worth every risk. Ethan would be home tomorrow, full of stories from his weekend with Jennifer. Lucas would have to tell him about Mara, about where this was going, about the possibility that their quiet life of two might expand to include someone else. But he thought his son would understand. Ethan had told him not to mess it up, after all. In his workshop, the rocking chair sat waiting, half-finished and patient. Lucas ran his hand over the carved headrest, feeling the grain of the walnut, the careful work of his own hands. Maybe he'd been building it for this, for evenings on the porch with someone he loved. For the future he'd stopped letting himself imagine. The dresser would be finished this week. The bookshelf was just beginning. There was always another project, another piece of wood waiting to be transformed into something beautiful and functional and lasting. That's what he and Mara were doing too, taking the raw materials of their broken pasts and careful presents and building something that might last. It wouldn't be perfect. There would be mistakes and adjustments and moments when the grain ran wrong and they'd have to start over. But that was the nature of real work, real love. You showed up, you paid attention, you made something worth keeping. Lucas turned off the workshop lights and headed inside. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Richard's legal games, Mara's anxiety, the ordinary complications of two damaged people learning to trust again. But tonight, he let himself feel hopeful. Tonight, he let himself believe that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places, from blind dates you didn't want to go on, from terrible cafes with nautical themes, from two people choosing to be brave enough to try. He fell asleep thinking about Mara in his kitchen, making terrible coffee. Mara curled against him in the morning light, Mara standing in his workshop telling him she loved him. He fell asleep knowing that whatever came next, legal battles or fear or the inevitable stumbles of any relationship, they'd face it together. And that made all the difference. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm that felt both natural and hard-won, like a song learned through practice rather than instinct. Lucas and Mara moved through their days knowing that Richard's legal challenge hung over them like a low-pressure system, always threatening but not yet breaking. Sharon had filed their response, a comprehensive document that laid out every detail of the original settlement and made it abundantly clear that Richard's claims had no merit. Now they waited for a court date, for the system to grind through its processes while they tried to live normally despite the uncertainty. Ethan had taken the news about Mara with the casual acceptance of children who adapted faster than adults gave them credit for. "So she's your girlfriend now?" he'd asked over breakfast the morning after Lucas had finally explained where things stood. "Yeah, she is." "Cool. Can she come to my winter concert? Mom's bringing Craig, and it'd be nice to have people there who actually like each other." The observation had been so matter-of-fact, so devoid of any attempt at manipulation, that Lucas had laughed despite the small ache it caused. His son saw more than he let on, understood the careful politeness between Lucas and Jennifer, the performance they maintained for his sake. "I'll ask her. I'm sure she'd love to come." And she had loved it, sitting between Lucas and Simone in the crowded school auditorium while Ethan played trumpet in a band concert that was enthusiastic, if not exactly musical. Afterward, when Ethan had introduced Mara to his friends with casual pride, "This is my dad's girlfriend. She's an English teacher," Lucas had felt something shift in his chest. This was real now, acknowledged, part of the visible structure of their lives, rather than something private and protected. Jennifer had been cordial when they'd crossed paths in the lobby, Craig hovering awkwardly at her elbow. She'd shaken Mara's hand and made small talk about teaching, and if there was any tension, it was the ordinary discomfort of exes navigating new configurations rather than anything hostile. On the drive home, Ethan had declared the evening a success because nobody acted weird, which Lucas took as the highest compliment an 11-year-old could offer. The dinner with Derek and Simone had been exactly as exhausting as Mara had predicted. They'd arrived at the restaurant to find Simone practically vibrating with excitement, Derek wearing a shirt that said professional matchmaker, which he claimed was a coincidence but absolutely wasn't. "I knew it," Simone had said before they'd even ordered drinks. "I knew from the moment I suggested it. You two are perfect for each other." "We're really not," Mara had said, smiling. "We're both disasters. We just happen to be compatible disasters." "Even better, functional people are boring," Simone had raised her glass. "To blind dates that aren't actually disasters. To proving that sometimes your friends know better than you do. And to Lucas finally smiling again." The toast had been embarrassing and sincere and entirely Simone, and Lucas had found himself grateful for friends who cared enough to meddle, even when it was annoying. Now, 3 weeks before Christmas, Lucas stood in his workshop putting the final touches on the dresser that had consumed most of his fall. The drawer fronts were perfect, the hardware gleaming, the finish smooth as glass. It was some of his best work, and he felt the familiar satisfaction of a job done right. His phone rang, Mara's name on the screen calling during school hours, which was unusual. "Hey, is everything okay?" "It's over." Her voice was bright, almost giddy. "Sharon just called." Richard withdrew the motion. "It's done." Lucas set down his tools carefully, making sure he'd heard correctly. "He withdrew it? Just like that?" Sharon said his lawyer probably told him he was wasting everyone's time and money. The original settlement was airtight, and trying to challenge it made him look petty and vindictive. So he dropped it. She laughed, the sound bubbling up like champagne. "Lucas, it's actually over. No court date, no depositions, no months of legal battles. He just gave up." "How do you feel?" There was a pause while she considered. "Relieved. Angry that he put me through this in the first place, but mostly relieved. And Sharon said something else. She thinks we have grounds for a harassment case now. Between showing up at the market, the frivolous legal motion, all the documented contacts over the past 2 years, she thinks we could get a restraining order if I want one." "Do you want one?" "I think I do. Not because I'm scared of him exactly, but because I want it officially documented that he needs to leave me alone, that this part of my life is closed." "Then do it." "Sharon's drafting the petition now. She said it's a strong case." Mara exhaled slowly. "I never thought I'd be the kind of person who needed a restraining order against her ex-husband. But here we are." "You're not the kind of person." "There is no kind of person. You're just someone protecting herself from someone who hurt you. That's not weakness, Mara. That's strength." "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I just love you and want you to be safe." "I love you too. And Lucas, thank you for being steady through all of this, for not running when things got complicated." "Where would I run to? Everything I want is right here." After they hung up, Lucas stood in his workshop feeling the weight lift, the tension he hadn't fully acknowledged dissolving. Richard had been a shadow over their relationship since the farmer's market, a reminder that the past could intrude on the present whenever it wanted. But now that shadow was receding, and what remained was just them, two people building something real. He spent the rest of the afternoon finishing the dresser, the physical work calming and meditative. When Ethan got home from school, Lucas was in the driveway loading it into his truck for delivery. "That looks good," Ethan said, running his hand over the cherry wood. "Like, really good." "Thanks, bud." "Is Mara coming over tonight?" "Probably. Why?" Ethan shrugged, the studied casualness of a kid working up to something. "I was thinking, for Christmas, what if we got her something, like from both of us?" Lucas felt warmth spread through his chest. "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know, but she likes books, right? And poetry? Maybe we could find something cool, not just like a normal book, something special." "I think that's a great idea. Want to go look this weekend?" "Yeah," Ethan grinned. "And Dad? I'm glad you're not sad anymore. Mara's good for you." Lucas pulled his son into a quick hug, The kind Ethan still tolerated even though he was getting too old for them. She is, and you're pretty good for me too. Obviously, I'm excellent. That evening, after delivering the dresser and accepting effusive praise from the client who'd commissioned it, Lucas came home to find Mara's car already in his driveway. She was sitting on his front steps despite the cold, 2 grocery bags beside her. "I brought ingredients for dinner," she announced. "And before you panic, I'm not cooking, you are. I'm just providing supplies and moral support." "What are we making?" "Something complicated. Sharon suggested we celebrate, and I figured what better way than forcing you to teach me how to make something that requires actual skill." "You're setting yourself up for disappointment. I'm not a chef." "No, but you're patient and good at explaining things. Plus, I trust you not to make fun of me when I inevitably mess something up." They made lasagna from scratch, rolling pasta dough, simmering sauce, layering everything with the kind of care that turned food into meditation. Mara was terrible at rolling the dough evenly, kept forgetting which direction to turn the pasta machine crank, and somehow got flour in her hair despite the fact that they weren't working with flour anymore by that point. But she laughed at her mistakes instead of getting frustrated, and Lucas found himself falling in love with her incompetence, the way she attacked cooking with the same determination she brought to everything else even though the results were chaotic. "This is actually fun," she said, layering ricotta with more enthusiasm than precision. "I always thought cooking was stressful, but this is nice. It helps when you're not doing it alone, and when there's no pressure to be perfect." Is that your philosophy on everything? No pressure to be perfect?" "More or less. Perfect is boring anyway. I'd rather have real." She kissed him then, leaving a smear of ricotta on his cheek that neither of them noticed until later, when they saw themselves in the bathroom mirror and dissolved into laughter. Over dinner, which turned out surprisingly good despite Mara's help, they talked about the restraining order, about what came next, about the relief of finally closing a chapter that had stayed open too long. "Sharon thinks we'll have it finalized within a month," Mara said. "Richard won't contest it. His lawyer already told him it's a losing battle. So by January, it'll be official. He won't be able to contact me, won't be able to show up places, won't be able to use the law as a weapon." "How does that feel?" "Like I can finally breathe all the way. Like I've been holding my breath for 2 years and didn't realize it until now." She twirled pasta around her fork. "I keep thinking about all the energy I've spent being afraid of him, worrying about running into him, dreading his emails, bracing myself for whatever new way he'd find to remind me that he still had power over me. And now that's ending. That energy gets to go towards something else." "Like what?" "Like this. Like us. Like figuring out what I actually want instead of just reacting to what I'm afraid of." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "I want to wake up in the morning thinking about you instead of about whether today's the day Richard decides to make my life difficult. I want to make plans without that background anxiety. I want to just be happy. You deserve that." "So do you." She squeezed his hand. "I know your divorce was different from mine. Amicable, mutual, all those words that make it sound clean, but I also know it hurt. I know you've been rebuilding yourself just like I have, and I want you to know that I see that." "I see how brave it is that you let me in." Lucas felt emotion tighten his throat. It didn't feel brave, it felt terrifying. Same thing, I think. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, it's doing the thing despite the fear. "Where'd you learn that?" "Therapy, and a lot of bad self-help books. And you, actually. Watching you show up consistently even when I was a mess. That taught me more about courage than any book." They finished dinner and migrated to the couch, Mara curled against Lucas's side while some movie played on TV that neither of them paid attention to. Bear had claimed the other end of the couch, his head on Mara's lap, and she absently stroked his ears while they talked. "I've been thinking about something," Mara said during a commercial break. "About us and what comes next." Lucas's stomach tightened slightly. "Okay. Nothing bad, just we've been doing this back and forth thing. Your place, my place, both of us maintaining separate lives that intersect. And I'm wondering if maybe we should think about changing that. Changing it how? I don't know exactly. I'm not saying we should move in together tomorrow. That feels too fast, and I like having my own space. But maybe more integration? Like maybe some of your stuff at my place, some of mine here? Or keys to each other's apartments? I want it to feel less like we're visiting each other and more like we're building a shared life. Lucas felt relief wash through him. This wasn't ending. This was deepening. I'd like that. And for what it's worth, you're welcome here anytime. You don't need an invitation or a plan. If you want to just show up, you show up. Same for you. Although fair warning, Dostoevsky's attitude toward you has not improved. I'll win him over eventually. I'm very persistent. You really are. She shifted to look at him directly. Lucas, I need to say something, and I need you to really hear it. I'm listening. I love you. Not just because you're kind or because you make me feel safe, though those things matter, but because you're you. Because you build beautiful things and love your son and get up at ungodly hours to make perfect coffee. Because you're steady without being boring, careful without being controlling. Because you saw me at my worst, crying in parking lots, terrified of my ex-husband, a complete mess. And you didn't run. You stayed. You kept showing up, and that means everything to me. Lucas pulled her closer, his own eyes damp. I love you too. And I need you to know that you're not a mess. You're a person who survived something hard and came out the other side stronger. You're a person who chose to be brave even when it was terrifying. And watching you fight for yourself, for us, for the life you deserve, that's made me braver too. They kissed, slow and deep, and for a while the movie and the world and everything else faded away. When they finally pulled apart, Mara was smiling through tears. How did we get so lucky? She asked. Simone's aggressive matchmaking? I'm serious. I don't know. Maybe we both reached a point where we were ready, where we'd done enough work on ourselves that we could recognize something good when we found it. Lucas brushed a strand of hair from her face. Or maybe we just got lucky. I'll take it either way. The weeks leading to Christmas passed in a blur of ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because they were shared. Lucas and Ethan went shopping for Mara's gift and found a first edition of Mary Oliver's poetry in a used bookstore, the pages worn soft with reading. Mara helped Ethan with a school project about sustainable building practices, and Lucas came home to find them at the kitchen table surrounded by research and laughter. They had their first fight, about nothing important, just the kind of friction that came from two independent people learning to share space, and worked through it by talking instead of retreating. The restraining order was granted a week before Christmas. Sharon called with the news, and Mara celebrated by taking Lucas and Ethan out for pizza at the terrible place near the lake that had somehow become their spot. To legal victories, she said, raising her glass of cheap wine, and to being officially, legally free. To Mara, Ethan added, completely sincere. For being brave. She'd teared up at that, and Lucas had loved his son even more for seeing what mattered, for understanding that sometimes the biggest battles were the quiet ones fought against people who used to be close. Christmas morning arrived cold and bright, the kind of perfect winter day that seemed designed for celebration. Lucas woke to find Ethan already up, waiting with barely contained patience for presents. They had their traditional breakfast first, pancakes, bacon, fresh orange juice, and Lucas sent a photo to Mara of his son covered in syrup and grinning. She texted back immediately, "Save me some pancakes. I'm on my way." "Mara's coming over?" Ethan asked, seeing his father's smile. "If that's okay with you." "Dad, obviously it's okay. She's part of this now." She arrived an hour later carrying Dostoevsky in a cat carrier, a bottle of champagne, and a container of homemade cookies that she admitted she'd bought at the bakery because there are limits to my domestic abilities. "You brought the cat?" Lucas asked, surprised. "He hates being alone on holidays. I know that sounds insane, but he gets stressed." She set down the carrier, and Dostoevsky peered out with his usual expression of deep suspicion. "Plus, I thought maybe if Bear and Dostoevsky spent time together, they might form an alliance." "Or they'll hate each other and it'll be a disaster," Ethan said cheerfully. "Also possible." The animals ignored each other with pointed disinterest, which everyone agreed was probably the best-case scenario. They opened presents around the tree. Lucas had gotten Mara a handmade jewelry box with a secret compartment, and she'd cried when she opened it. She gave him a set of vintage chisels she'd tracked down through estate sales, and Lucas had held them with reverence while explaining to Ethan why they were special. For Ethan, they'd collaborated on gifts. Mara got him books and a writing journal for when you're ready to be the next great American author, and Lucas had built him a custom desk for his room with built-in shelves and a reading light. "This is the coolest thing I've ever gotten," Ethan said, running his hands over the oak surface. Actually, this is amazing." "Your dad built it," Mara said. "All I did was pick out the desk lamp." "You did more than that," Lucas said. "You convinced me he was ready for a grown-up desk instead of the kid furniture he's been using." "Because he is grown up, or getting there." She smiled at Ethan. "You're going to do great things with this desk. I can feel it." Later, after Ethan had disappeared into his room to set up his new workspace, Lucas and Mara sat on the couch with champagne and cookies, watching snow begin to fall outside the window. "This is nice," Mara said softly. "Being here. Being part of this. You're always part of this, whether you're physically here or not." "I know, but it still feels good to be included. To spend Christmas morning with you and Ethan instead of alone in my apartment pretending I don't care about holidays." "Did you used to do that? Pretend you didn't care?" "Every year since the divorce. I tell myself it was just another day, that the loneliness was fine, that I preferred being alone. But I was lying." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I wanted this. Family, tradition, someone to make pancakes with and open presents with and just be with. Well, you have it now, for as long as you want it. Forever then. I want it forever." Lucas felt his heart expand, pressing against his ribs. "Forever works for me." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow accumulate on the bare branches outside, turning the world soft and white. In his room, Ethan was probably already at his new desk, reading or drawing or planning whatever project had captured his imagination. In the cat carrier, Dostoevsky had finally relaxed enough to sleep. Bear was sprawled by the fireplace, his usual spot. Everything was ordinary and perfect and exactly right. "Lucas?" Mara said after a while. "Yeah?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For showing up at that terrible cafe, for texting me back, for not running when things got hard, for building me a jewelry box with a secret compartment, for loving Ethan in a way that makes me want to be part of his life, for being exactly who you are." She sat up to look at him directly. "For making me believe in second chances. You did the same for me. I was surviving, not living. You reminded me there's a difference. We're pretty good for each other, huh?" "The best." She kissed him, tasting like champagne and sugar and promise. When they pulled apart, she was smiling that smile he loved, the real one, unguarded, completely herself. "So what's next for us?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we've fought my ex-husband, survived the legal system, met each other's important people, successfully navigated a holiday. What's the next chapter?" Lucas thought about the rocking chair in his workshop, finally finished last week, and waiting for its purpose. He thought about the conversations they'd been having about integration, about keys and shared space and building a life together. He thought about Ethan upstairs, already treating Mara like family, already assuming she'd be around for important things. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I think that's okay. We don't need to plan everything. We can just keep showing up, keep choosing each other, keep building this thing between us, see where it goes." Very philosophical for someone who color codes his drill bits. "I'm complex. I contain multitudes." "You really do." She settled back against him. "Okay, no plans. Just presence and patience and seeing what happens. I can work with that." Outside, the snow continued to fall, transforming the familiar landscape into something new. Lucas held Mara close and felt gratitude for everything that had led to this moment. The terrible blind date that started it all, the courage to keep showing up despite fear, the willingness to risk his carefully controlled life for the possibility of something more. His phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Merry Christmas, man. Hope you're spending it with a certain English teacher who definitely didn't come from a blind date we set up." Lucas typed back, "Best prank you ever pulled. Thank you." Derek, "Not a prank, a gift. You're welcome." He showed Mara the exchange, and she laughed. "Should we tell them it worked out?" "They know. Simone probably has a spreadsheet tracking our relationship milestones. Definitely. She asked me last week when we were moving in together. I told her we were taking it slow. And? And she said slow was overrated and we should just acknowledge we're already basically living together. Mara paused. She's not entirely wrong. No, Lucas agreed. She's not. They spent the rest of Christmas Day in comfortable domesticity, cooking dinner together, watching movies with Ethan, playing board games that got competitive in the way only families could be. When evening came and Mara gathered Dostoevsky to head home, there was a moment of hesitation. You could stay, Lucas offered, if you want. I could, but I think I want to wake up in my own bed tomorrow. Start the day there and come back here after. Is that okay? Of course. Whatever you need. She kissed him at the door, long and lingering. I love you. Merry Christmas. I love you too. Merry Christmas, Mara. He watched her drive away through the falling snow, her taillights disappearing around the corner, but this time the watching didn't feel like loss. It felt like the pause between breaths, the space that made the next inhale sweeter. Ethan appeared at his elbow. She's coming back tomorrow, right? Right. Good. I like having her around. He paused. Dad, are you going to marry her? The question caught Lucas off guard. I don't know, maybe, someday. Why? Just wondering. I think you should. She makes you happy and she's cool, and Bear likes her. Ethan grinned. Plus, it'd be nice to have someone around who can help me with English homework. Lucas laughed and pulled his son into a hug. Those are all very practical reasons. I'm a practical person. I get it from you. Later that night, after Ethan was asleep and the house was quiet, Lucas sat in his workshop with a cup of tea and the rocking chair. He ran his hand over the carved headrest, feeling the smoothness of the finish, the precision of the joints. A year of work, and now it was complete. He'd thought about giving it to Mara for Christmas, but had held back, unsure if it was too much, too presumptuous. But sitting here now, he realized the chair wasn't for her specifically. It was for them, for the life they were building together, the future they were growing into day by day. His phone buzzed. Mara. Home safe. Dostoevsky is sulking because he actually had fun at your place and doesn't want to admit it. Lucas. Bear's doing the same. They're more alike than they want to acknowledge. Mara. Stubborn and judgmental, but secretly soft? Yeah, that tracks. Lucas. I was talking about the animals. Mara. Sure you were. Lucas. What are you doing tomorrow? Mara. Whatever you want. I'm off all week. Lucas. Come over in the morning. I have something to show you. Mara. Mysterious. I like it. Lucas. It's not that mysterious, just something I've been working on. Mara. Now I'm intrigued. What time? Lucas. Whenever you wake up, no rush. Mara. Okay. Lucas? Lucas. Yeah? Mara. Today was perfect. Thank you for including me in your Christmas. Lucas. It wouldn't have been the same without you. Mara. Good night. Dream about me. Lucas. Always do. He set down his phone and looked at the rocking chair again. Tomorrow he'd show it to Mara, would watch her face when she realized he'd made it for them, for whatever future they were building. She'd probably cry, and he'd probably feel awkward about it, and then they'd sit in it together and plan the next phase of their lives. Or they wouldn't plan anything. They'd just be present, just keep showing up, just continue building this thing between them with the same care and attention Lucas brought to his woodwork, slowly, deliberately, with respect for the grain and trust in the process. Outside his workshop window, the snow had stopped, leaving everything clean and new. Inside, surrounded by the tools of his trade and the evidence of work done well, Lucas Reed felt something he hadn't felt in 4 years. Complete. Not because Mara had filled some empty space in his life, but because loving her had reminded him that he was allowed to want more than survival, allowed to choose joy even when it came with risk. The joke-blind date that wasn't really a joke had become the foundation of something real. The fortress he'd built around his heart had developed a door, and he'd chosen to open it. And the woman who'd walked through, late, skeptical, carrying her own wounds and walls, had become the person he couldn't imagine facing the world without. He turned off the workshop lights and headed inside, passing the rocking chair one more time. Tomorrow, it would have its purpose. Tonight, it was just another promise waiting to be fulfilled, another piece of the future taking shape in the present. Lucas climbed into bed and fell asleep thinking about Mara's smile, about Ethan's acceptance, about the life they were building together from the broken pieces of what came before. He fell asleep knowing that sometimes the best things started as pranks, that courage looked like showing up scared, and that love, real, complicated, messy love, was always worth the risk of being hurt. In the morning, he'd show Mara the rocking chair. She'd understand what it meant, would see the year of work and care and hope built into every joint and curve. They'd plan their next steps, or they wouldn't plan anything at all. Either way, they'd face it together. And that, Lucas realized as sleep finally claimed him, was all that really mattered. Not the perfect ending or the guaranteed future, but the choice to keep showing up, keep being present, keep building something worth keeping. The rest would follow if they were patient and brave and willing to risk their carefully protected hearts for the possibility of something extraordinary. The single dad who'd built his life around routine and woodwork and quiet evenings had learned that sometimes the best constructions were the ones you didn't plan, the ones that grew organically from showing up and paying attention and being willing to adapt when the grain ran differently than expected. And the joke, the blind date that was supposed to be another disappointment, had become the moment everything changed, the instant when a man who'd stopped believing in second chances chose to try anyway, and discovered that sometimes, when you're brave enough to want something, the universe meets you halfway.